Hey y'all, here are the facts about climate change that everyone should know. From mass immigration across continents to suspicious backroom deals by oil company CEOs, the climate is heating up. But how is this happening, and how does it impact us? Did oil CEOs know about this 50 years ago and hide it? Did we go too far, or do we still have some time to do something, and what? In this video, we'll look at all that. What are the challenges, and what are the new technologies being developed to meet them? Stick around until the end, and we'll also touch on the #1 most important thing that you can do about climate change personally. Without further delay, let's get into it. According to a vital climate organization called nature.org, the following is the definition of climate change. Quote, "Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, mainly caused by human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels." Unquote. In other words, burning coal, oil, and gas sends CO2 into our atmosphere, creating a heating effect, resulting in higher temperatures and changing weather patterns worldwide. In 1988, the 154 countries of the United Nations created an international group called the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. When it was founded, the IPCC was asked to investigate climate change to understand it better. The panel was formed of hundreds of experienced scientists from around the world, chosen by the global scientific community, working with expert teams in their home countries. Thousands of people came together to form a joint scientific assessment. Over the last 5 to 10 years, their reports and predictions have become increasingly grim as we have kept burning more fossil fuels. So what did they find out? Here's what they said in 2022, quote, "Beyond 2040, we will see biodiversity loss and degradation, damages to, and transformation of ecosystems. Up to 14% of animal species assessed will likely face a very high risk of extinction. Global glacier loss is projected to reduce how much water is available for agriculture. Climate change will put more and more pressure on food production and access to foods, especially in vulnerable regions, undermining food security and nutrition worldwide. Furthermore, global warming will progressively weaken soil health and ecosystem services such as pollination, increase pressure from pests and disease, and reduce the prevalence of marine animals like fish." Unquote. So now you're probably thinking, oh wow, what a grim report. But that's the reality we're facing today. Climate change is terrible for our ecosystem and our planet. So here's a crazy fact. It turns out that many oil company executives knew about this problem more than 40 years ago, but kept it a secret or underplayed it. To this day, some fossil fuel companies and their leaders, despite knowing of the threat of climate change to our ecosystem, still defend their business's growth. As far back as 1912, before the First World War, scientists had predicted that burning coal would negatively affect the climate. Unfortunately, their thoughts were relegated to a small column in the middle pages of a newspaper. Some people did actually take a look at this exciting piece of history. In 2017, Harvard professor Jeffrey Supran was interviewed about oil companies' reluctance to face the truth and said, quote, "Our research was the first peer-reviewed analysis of ExxonMobil's 40-year history of climate change communications. And what we discovered was that there were systematic discrepancies between, on the one hand, what Exxon and ExxonMobil scientists said about climate science privately and in academic circles versus what ExxonMobil said to the general public in the New York Times and elsewhere." Unquote. That analysis suggested that ExxonMobil misled the public about basic climate science and its implications. Between 1998 and 2004, ExxonMobil reportedly gave $16 million to organizations that disputed the impact of global warming, and they did this while fully aware that climate change was a real phenomenon. In effect, they were using the same media tactics as tobacco companies had done in the past, hiding the harmful effects of smoking while continuing to sell billions of dollars worth of cigarettes. The topic of climate cover-ups is so vast that we hardly will have time for it here. But give us a quick tap on the subscribe button now and make sure to hear more about it later when we publish a new video about it. Despite all the talk about climate change, some people still find comfort in the idea that climate change is not really affecting them where they live. Unfortunately, we're all in the same boat. While it's true that some regions will be much more affected than others, the consequences down the line affect us all. Here's a small example of a result we will all witness. According to the UN, hundreds of millions of people worldwide will be at risk of coastal flooding from climate change by 2050. That's just 28 years from now, much sooner than you may want to imagine, which should lead you to ask the following. Where will these desperate people go when their communities and countries are underwater or destroyed by storms, hurricanes, or droughts? How will they survive with all their industries, agriculture, and land destroyed? Of course, they'll want to move to places with better living conditions. Where will that be? To put things to scale, as an example, compare this potentially massive climate-induced migration to the 1.7 million people that attempted to cross the U.S. border between 2007 and 2021 and created the considerable border problems that have caused so much political turmoil in the United States recently. Or compare it to the Syrian refugee crisis in 2016, with an astonishing 5 million desperate people seeking help outside their own country, leading to the same sort of political conflicts in Europe. Try imagining what will happen to global politics when 10, 20, or 100 times as many people are seeking new homes around the world. Or how about 1,000 times as many people? Yes, a 2017 study from Cornell University predicted that up to 2 billion people could become climate refugees. Granted, that number is a high estimate and is for the year 2100, but already by 2060, just 40 years from now, that would already be around 1.4 billion people. Interpolating back to today, that could be more than 500 million people already in the next 10 years. Hundreds of millions of people will need help, and not one person in the world will be able to ignore their cries for help. The OECD Trade Organization has predicted climate change will also negatively affect maritime trade, accounting for about 80% of all worldwide trade by volume. Port closures and damage to infrastructure would make the supply issues we've seen during the recent COVID outbreak look like a minor traffic incident on your local freeway. These are just a few of the many global consequences of climate change. More consequences include more dramatic impacts, such as species extinction, famine, and diseases, but these are all topics for another day. It's not the end yet, however. As we mentioned in the beginning, we go over what we can do to stop this from happening and what the number one thing is that you can do. Let's get into that now. If you've come this far, that means you believe there's some hope for our planet. Over the years, companies have been working on technologies that could help stop climate change, and some of their experiments have been successful. Technologies now exist to stop the emission of carbon into our atmosphere. Energy sources such as solar energy, wind energy, nuclear energy, and energy from waves or geothermal vents in the ground are being used to replace carbon to reduce climate change. All these energy sources combined can help us to create a clean economy that doesn't run on expensive fossil fuels dug out of the ground and emitted into our atmosphere. So, in general terms, what should we do to solve this? In 2019, the UN outlined 6 critical factors in climate mitigation in a report titled Roadmap to 2050, a manual for nations to decarbonize by mid-century. The key factors are as follows. 1. Zero carbon electricity. Transform all electricity generation to clean energy sources. 2. Electrification of end uses. Make all energy consumption electric and therefore green. 3. Green synthetic fuels. Create new fuels that are not based on fossils in the ground but are now renewable. 4. Smart power grids. Make a digital and intelligent power grid that can support many different sources of energy. 5. Material efficiency. Reduce emissions from material production such as plastic and increase material reuse and recycling. 6. Sustainable land use. Make intelligent global agricultural choices, meaning produce more with less. You can find a link in the description to another video on this channel where we dive deeper into these. However, as promised, let's touch on the number one thing you can do. How can you, a single individual, stop this? Well, individual action will be far from enough. It will take years of collective, decisive action to transition toward a safer world. But if we must choose one single action, here it is. Recently, celebrity science educator Bill Nye the Science Guy said, "To be sure, recycle the bottles, don't throw the plastic away, and compost your compostable things. Start there." But then he added, "But if you want to do one thing about climate change, vote. And if you're a kid and you can't vote yet, make sure your parents vote. Hassle them." As individuals, we follow the laws of our society, and so do corporations, including fossil fuel companies. Find out which politicians in your area are supporters of the green energy transition and climate action, and make sure to vote for them. The bottom line here is this: vote. And that's it for today's video. quick ask to please like and subscribe to get more great content. If you like the 6 ways to mitigate climate change mentioned earlier and want to know more, we go over these in much more detail in this other video that you can find here on the right. Of course, if you have questions or suggestions, please put them in the comments down below. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the following video.